This is the story of the Silent Symphony, a story about how far a father will go for love, and how a broken piggy bank changed everything. The radiator in apartment 4B clanged and hissed, fighting a losing battle against the Chicago winter. Outside, the wind whipped off Lake Michigan, turning the city into a freezer. Inside, however, Joseph felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. He sat in his fraying armchair, a mug of lukewarm coffee in his hands, watching his 10-year-old daughter Sarah. She was sitting at the small, scratched kitchen table. Her eyes were closed, her head tilting slightly to the left, lost in a world only she could see. Her fingers moved gracefully over a piece of cardboard she had cut from an old cereal box. On it she had drawn black and white keys with a Sharpie. She pressed a key, paused, and then pressed another chord. To the world it was silent. To Sarah it was a symphony. "That's beautiful," Joseph whispered, his voice rough from sleep. Sarah's eyes snapped open. She smiled, a smile that looked so much like her mother's it made Joseph's chest ache. "It's not right yet, Daddy, the B-flat sticks." Joseph chuckled, setting his coffee down. "A sticky key on a paper piano. That's a new one." "Imagination needs maintenance too," she said seriously. Then her face softened. "Daddy, do you think?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Joseph knew exactly what she was asking. She had been asking with her eyes for 3 years, ever since she sat down at a public piano in the mall and played a perfect melody by ear, shocking everyone who walked by. Joseph stood up and walked over to her. He was a big man, his shoulders broadened by years of lifting crates at the logistics warehouse, but he moved gently. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "We talked about this, Sarah," he said firmly. She looked down at her paper keys. "I know rent is high, heating is expensive. I wasn't asking, I was just—" "Sarah, look at me." She looked up. "I promised you," Joseph said, his voice low and solemn. "This is the year, mister." Henderson at the warehouse confirmed the Christmas bonuses are clearing on the 20th. It's a merger bonus. It's big. Enough for the rent, enough for a feast, and enough for that upright Yamaha in the pawnshop window. Sarah's eyes widened, shimmering with hope. "The one with the mahogany finish." "The very same," Joseph grinned. "Real ivory keys, strings that vibrate, no more cardboard, I swear it on your mom's memory." Sarah jumped up and wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his flannel shirt. "You're the best, Daddy. I'm going to play for you every night. I'm going to write a song just for you." "I can't wait to hear it, baby." Joseph kissed the top of her head, closing his eyes. He held her for a moment longer than usual. The pressure on him was immense. He had $400 in savings and bills piling up, but that bonus was his lifeline. It was the raft that would keep them afloat. He glanced at the clock. 6:45 a.m. "All right, maestro, duty calls," Joseph pulled away. "I gotta get to work, big shipment day." He grabbed his heavy wool coat, the one with the patch on the elbow, and headed for the door. "Love you, Daddy, drive safe." "I take the bus, honey, but I'll be safe," he called back. As he stepped out into the biting cold, pulling his scarf tight, Joseph felt invincible. He was a man with a purpose. He was a father keeping a promise. He had no idea that his world was about to end. The bus ride to the industrial district was slow. The windows were frosted over, scratching out the gray world outside. Joseph spent the 40-minute ride doing mental math on the fogged glass. Bonus. $1,800 estimated rent. Utilities. Piano. $600 food gifts. It was tight. If the bonus was even $100 less, he'd be in trouble. But Henderson had winked at him yesterday. "Big things coming, Joe," he'd said. When the bus hissed to a halt in front of Logistics 1, Joseph frowned. Usually the loading bays were open. Forklifts beeped. Trucks idled, spewing diesel smoke. Men shouted over the noise of commerce. Today it was silent. The massive steel gates were chained shut. A crowd of about 50 men, drivers, loaders, packers, stood outside in the snow, huddled in confused clusters. Joseph pushed through the crowd, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. He found Mike, his shift supervisor, smoking a cigarette with a shaking hand. "Mike, what's going on? Freezing rain delay?" Joseph asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Mike looked at him with dead eyes. He didn't say a word. He just pointed to a white piece of paper taped to the freezing metal gate. Joseph stepped closer. The wind whipped the paper, making it hard to read, but the bold black letters burned into his retinas. Notice of immediate closure by order of the bankruptcy court, assets frozen. No entry. Joseph read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't make sense. It was like reading a foreign language. Bankruptcy. Joseph turned to Mike. "But the merger," Henderson said. "Henderson is a liar," Mike spat, throwing his cigarette into a snowbank. "The merger fell through 3 days ago. The investors pulled the plug last night. The company is gone, Joe, it's over." "But the payroll," Joseph stammered, grabbing Mike's jacket. "Payday is Friday, the bonus, the Christmas bonus." Mike laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "There is no bonus, Joe. There is no payroll. The bank locked the accounts at midnight. We aren't getting a dime." The world tilted. Joseph stumbled back, his boots slipping on the ice. He felt a ringing in his ears, drowning out the angry shouts of the other workers. No bonus, no salary, no job. "They can't do this," Joseph whispered. "I have rent, I have a kid." "Get in line," another worker yelled. "My wife is due in a month. These suits don't care about us." A black sedan pulled up, lawyers, or maybe the bank reps. The workers surged forward, screaming, banging on the windows. Security guards stepped out, hands on their holsters. Joseph didn't scream. He didn't fight. He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him colder than the winter air. He backed away step by step until he hit the bus stop bench. He collapsed onto it. He pulled out his wallet. He opened it. 3 $20 bills, a 5, 2 ones, $67, that was it. That was all the liquidity he had until. Until when? Unemployment checks took weeks, sometimes months to process. He thought of Sarah. He thought of her smile this morning. "I swear it on your mom's memory." "Oh God," Joseph buried his face in his hands. "What have I done?" He couldn't go home. It was only 8:30 a.m. If he went home now, Sarah would know. She would see his face. She would ask about the bonus. And he would have to tell her that not only was the piano gone, but they might be homeless by New Year's. He couldn't break her heart. Not yet. Joseph stood up. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard desperation. He was a father. Fathers didn't get to quit. He walked to a trash can and threw his lunch into it. He wasn't hungry. He needed that hunger to keep him sharp. He walked past the bus stop. He walked past the angry mob at the warehouse. He walked 4 blocks to the Labor Exchange Center, a place he hadn't visited in 15 years. A place where desperate men sold their backs for cash. He walked in. The room smelled of wet wool, stale sweat, and anxiety. Dozens of men sat on folding chairs, waiting for their names to be called for day labor. Joseph walked up to the counter. The woman behind the glass didn't look up. Name? Joseph Miller. Skills? Logistics, heavy lifting. Forklift certified, I can drive anything. Age 45. The woman paused. She looked up over her glasses. She saw the gray in his beard. She saw the lines around his eyes. "Heavy lifting is a young man's game, honey," she said, popping her gum. "Most crews want guys in their 20s. "I'm stronger than I look," Joseph said, his voice hard. "And I don't stop, just put me on the list." She shrugged and typed something. "Sit down. If something comes up, we'll call you." Joseph sat and he waited. 9:00 a.m., 10:00 a.m., 11:00 a.m. Men were called, younger men, stronger men. They left in vans to go pour concrete or haul drywall. Joseph sat, watching the clock tick away his life. Every tick was a second closer to Christmas. Every talk was a reminder of his empty wallet. At 1 p.m., a man in a greasy mechanic's jumpsuit walked in. "Need a guy to clean out a grease trap behind a diner. It's nasty work. $50 flat." The room was silent. Grease trap cleaning was the lowest of the low. It meant wading in sewage and rotting fat. Joseph stood up immediately. I'll take it. The mechanic looked at Joseph's decent wool coat. You sure, Pop? You gonna ruin those clothes? I have a change of shirt, Joseph lied. I'll take it. Let's go. Joseph returned to his apartment building at 7:00 p.m. He had spent the last hour at a gas station bathroom, scrubbing his skin with harsh pink soap until it was raw. The smell of the grease trap, a mix of rotten meat and chemicals, seemed to have seeped into his pores. He had thrown his undershirt away. It was unsalvageable. He buttoned his wool coat all the way up to his chin to hide the fact that he was wearing nothing underneath but his skin. He checked the mailbox in the lobby. Bill, flyer, and a red envelope. Final notice, rent past due. He shoved the letters into his pocket. He touched the single $50 bill in his other pocket. $50. He needed $1,500 just to survive the month. He needed $600 more for the piano. He took a deep breath, plastered a smile on his face, and unlocked the door to apartment 4B, Daddy. Sarah came running from her room. The apartment smelled of grilled cheese. You're late, she accused, but she was smiling. I kept your sandwich warm on the heater. Joseph stepped inside, carefully locking the door behind him to keep the world out. Sorry, sweetie. End-of-year inventory. The boss kept us late counting boxes. The lie tasted like bile in his throat. Did you get the bonus check? She asked, her eyes darting to his hands. Joseph's heart stopped. This was it. The moment of truth. Not yet, he said, forcing a casual tone. Mr. Henderson said there was a computer glitch with the banks. It'll clear in a few days, probably Christmas Eve. Sarah's face fell for a split second, but she bounced back quickly. That's okay. As long as it comes before Christmas morning, come eat. She grabbed his hand to pull him toward the kitchen. She stopped. She sniffed the air. Daddy, why do you smell like old onions? Joseph froze, the grease smell. Oh, that, he laughed nervously, pulling his hand away. Someone dropped a crate of onions in the warehouse today, smashed everywhere, smelled terrible. I need to go shower immediately. Okay, Sarah looked at him, a flicker of confusion in her hazel eyes. Go shower. I'll set the table. Joseph walked into the bathroom and locked the door. He turned on the shower to mask the sound. Then he sat on the edge of the tub, fully clothed, and put his head in his hands. He was shaking. He had survived day 1, but there were 9 days left, and he knew with a terrifying certainty that $50 a day wasn't going to be enough. He needed to do more. He needed to work nights. He needed to stop sleeping. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. You are going to get that piano, he hissed at himself, even if it kills you. Time remaining, 8 days to Christmas. Joseph stood in an alleyway behind a nondescript brick building on the south side at 10:45 p.m. The sign above the metal door buzzed with a dying neon light. Chicago Biodisposal Solutions. He knocked. The metal door groaned open, revealing a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He held a clipboard. You the guy from the agency? The man grunted, cigarette ash falling onto his boots. Yeah, Joseph. You got a strong stomach, Joseph. I have a daughter to feed, Joseph replied, his voice flat. That's strong enough. The man chuckled darkly and stepped aside. Grab a hazmat suit from the bin. Don't touch anything with your bare hands unless you want hepatitis. Shift ends at 5 a.m. $90 cash. Joseph stepped inside. The smell hit him instantly, a thick, cloying cocktail of industrial bleach, rotting organic matter, and the sharp metallic tang of iodine. It was the smell of sickness. For the next 6 hours, Joseph became a machine. He hauled heavy yellow bags marked biohazard from the loading dock to the incinerator chute. The bags were heavy, shifting with the weight of fluids and glass. His back, already screaming from the grease trap cleaning earlier that day, began to spasm. Every time he lifted a bag, a bolt of electricity shot down his spine. But he didn't stop. He couldn't heave, swing, throw $90, heave, swing, throw rent, heave, swing, throw piano. At 3 a.m. during a 10-minute break, Joseph sat on a plastic crate near the back exit, gasping for freezing air. He pulled out his phone. The background picture was Sarah, sitting on a swing, laughing. He looked at his hands. The cheap rubber gloves had left his skin pale and wrinkled. His knuckles were swollen. "Yo, old-timer," a younger worker, a kid named Marcus, sat down next to him. "You look like you're gonna pass out. Go home." "Can't," Joseph croaked, taking a sip of lukewarm water. "Need the overtime." "What for? Gambling debts?" Marcus asked, lighting a cigarette. Joseph smiled faintly. "A piano." Marcus stared at him, then laughed. "You're hauling medical waste in the middle of the night. For a piano, you're crazy, man." "Yeah," Joseph stood up as the whistle blew. "Maybe." Time remaining, 6 days to Christmas. The routine had set in. It was a brutal, punishing cycle that was slowly killing him. 6:00 a.m., 7:00 a.m., bus ride home, sleep 45 minutes. 7:00 a.m., 8:00 a.m., breakfast with Sarah. Pretend to be fresh. Pretend to go to the office. 8:30 a.m., 4:00 p.m., day labor. Demolition, moving, snow shoveling. 4:30 p.m., 7:00 p.m. Courier deliveries, running packages on foot downtown. 7:30 p.m., 9:00 p.m., dinner with Sarah. 10:00 p.m., 5:00 a.m., biodisposal night shift. Joseph was sleeping an average of 2 hours a day, mostly on the bus. He had learned to sleep standing up, wedged between other commuters. On Tuesday evening, Joseph came home later than usual. His courier shift had run long because of the blizzard. He unlocked the door, his fingers stiff with cold. The apartment was warm. Sarah was in the living room. She wasn't just drawing on the cardboard anymore. She had set up a strange contraption. She was sitting on a kitchen chair. On the floor, taped down with duct tape, were 3 empty soup cans, tomato, chicken noodle, and mushroom. She was pressing her feet against them in a rhythmic pattern while her fingers moved in the air. What is this?" Joseph asked, leaning against the doorframe to keep from falling over. Sarah jumped, startled. "Oh, Daddy, you're home." She looked at the cans. "It's for the pedals," she explained earnestly. "The sustain pedal, the sostenuto, and the soft pedal. I read about them at the library. I need to practice the foot timing so I'm ready when you bring the Yamaha." She looked up at him, her face glowing with pure dedication. "I don't want to sound bad on the first day." Joseph felt a lump in his throat so big he couldn't breathe. She was practicing footwork on soup cans. She was preparing for a gift he still didn't have enough money for. He walked over and hugged her. He squeezed her tight, burying his face in her hair so she wouldn't smell the bleach on his skin. "You're doing great, baby," he whispered. "You're doing so great." "You're shaking, Daddy," Sarah said, pulling back slightly. "Are you cold?" "Just the wind," Joseph lied. "Just the wind." Time remaining, 4 days to Christmas. The cracks were starting to show. Joseph was working a demolition job in an old office building downtown. They were tearing down cubicle walls. It was heavy, dusty work. He was swinging a sledgehammer. Bang, bang, bang. The rhythm was hypnotic. His eyes were heavy. His brain was foggy. For a second, just a fraction of a second, he fell asleep while swinging. The hammer slipped. It didn't hit his foot, thankfully. It smashed into a glass partition he wasn't supposed to break yet. Shards of glass exploded outward. "Hey, watch it!" the foreman screamed. Joseph jerked awake, heart pounding. A piece of glass had sliced his cheek. Blood trickled down into his gray beard. "I'm awake," Joseph gasped. I'm good. "You look like a zombie, Miller," the foreman spat. "Go wash your face. You're scaring the other guys." Joseph went to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror. The man staring back was a stranger. His eyes were sunk deep into dark purple bruises. His skin was gray. His lips were chapped and bleeding. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. He washed the blood off his cheek. He put a piece of toilet paper on the cut. He checked his secret stash count in his head. Current total, $940. Goal, $1,600. Missing, $660. He was getting there, but he was running out of time, and he was running out of life. That night at dinner, the facade almost crumbled completely. They were eating pasta. Sarah was talking about her school Christmas pageant. And then Mrs. Gable said I could play the triangle, but I told her I play piano, and she said, "That." Joseph's head nodded. His chin hit his chest. The fork slipped from his hand and clattered onto the plate. Clang. Joseph jerked up, blinking wildly. "I'm listening. Triangle, yes." Sarah wasn't talking anymore. She was staring at him. Her fork was suspended halfway to her mouth. "Daddy, you fell asleep," she said softly. "No, I didn't." Joseph rubbed his eyes fast. "Just rested my eyes. Long day." Sarah put her fork down. She reached across the table and took his hand. Before Joseph could pull away, she turned his palm over. She gasped. His hands were a wreck, blisters upon blisters. Some had popped and were raw red. His fingernails were black with grime that no soap could reach. There was a fresh burn mark on his wrist from a hot pipe at the waste facility. "Daddy," Sarah's voice trembled. "Your hands. What happened?" Joseph pulled his hand back as if he had been burned. He hid them under the table. "Paper cuts," he said. "A stupid lie, a desperate lie. And moving some boxes, it's nothing. Logistics is rough this time of year." Sarah didn't look convinced. She looked at his cut cheek. She looked at his red eyes. "Are you sure you're working at the office?" she asked. Her voice was small, scared. "You never used to come home dirty." Joseph's heart hammered against his ribs. He couldn't tell her. If he told her he lost his job, she would know there was no bonus. She would know there was no piano. The magic would die. He forced a laugh. It sounded hollow. "Of course I'm at the office. We're just renovating the warehouse. Everyone has to pitch in, even the managers." He stood up abruptly. "I have to go out for a bit. Forgot to mail a letter." At night, Sarah asked, "It's important. Go to bed, honey. I'll see you in the morning." Joseph grabbed his coat and fled the apartment. He couldn't look at her. The guilt was heavier than any trash bag he had carried. He stood in the hallway, leaning against the cold wall, trying to breathe. He had $940. He needed to make $660 in 4 days. That was $165 a day. He took out his phone and dialed the number for the high-risk, moving crew, the guys who moved pianos and safes up narrow staircases. It paid double, but it broke backs. "Hello, Tony," Joseph whispered into the phone. "Yeah, it's Miller. I'm available. Yeah, I can lift heavy. Put me on the morning shift and the night shift." He hung up. He looked at his broken hands. He made a fist, fighting through the pain. "4 more days," he whispered to the empty hallway. "Just hold on for 4 more days." He walked out into the snow, leaving a trail of blood drops from his reopened blisters. Time remaining, 2 days to Christmas. The safe weighed 600 pounds. It was an antique iron gun safe, the kind they don't make anymore because they are too heavy to move. But Joseph was moving it. He and 3 other guys were inching it up the narrow servant staircase of a Victorian mansion in Lincoln Park. On 3, heave. "Tony," the crew leader shouted. Joseph was at the bottom right corner, taking the brunt of the weight. His knees trembled violently. Sweat stung his eyes, blinding him, but he couldn't wipe it away. His hands were locked onto the slippery metal dolly. 1 step, 2 steps. Rent, piano, he was running on fumes. He hadn't slept in 48 hours. The caffeine pills he bought at the gas station were the only reason his heart was still beating, thumping against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Watch the wall," Tony screamed. "Don't scratch the paint." Joseph blinked. For a second the staircase seemed to stretch out into infinity. The edges of his vision went black. A wave of nausea rolled over him. Microsleep. It only lasted a fraction of a second, but that was enough. Joseph's right foot slipped on the carpeted step. His knee buckled. The weight of the safe shifted instantly, crashing down onto his corner. "Look out." Joseph tried to catch it. It was instinct. A stupid, fatal instinct. He jammed his left hand under the metal edge to stop it from hitting the wall. Crunch. The sound was sickening. It sounded like a dry branch snapping in winter. Joseph didn't scream. The air just rushed out of his lungs in a sharp hiss. He fell back against the banister, clutching his left hand to his chest. The safe slammed into the wall, gouging a hole in the plaster before the other 3 men managed to steady it. "You idiot!" Tony roared, his face turning purple. "You put a hole in the wall, you hear that? That's my insurance deductible." Joseph couldn't hear him. The world was swimming. He looked down at his hand. It was wrong. His ring finger and pinky were bent at an angle that fingers shouldn't bend. They were pointing sideways. The skin was turning a dark, angry purple instantly. Joseph tried to speak, but the pain was a white-hot lance shooting up his arm, exploding in his shoulder. "Get out of here." Tony shoved him. "You're fired. Get off my job site." Joseph looked up, eyes wide with panic. "My pay, Tony, I worked 6 hours. The safe is almost up." "You caused $500 of damage," Tony yelled. "You're lucky I don't sue you." "You get nothing. 0. Get lost before I call the cops." "Please," Joseph grabbed Tony's sleeve with his good hand. Desperation made him bold. "I need this money. It's Christmas, my daughter." Tony slapped his hand away. "Everyone has a sob story, Miller. You can't lift with a busted hand. You're useless to me. Go." Joseph stood there for a moment, swaying. The pain in his hand was agonizing, but the pain in his heart was worse. He had lost the job. He had lost the day's pay, $200, and he had broken his hand. He stumbled down the stairs, out the front door, and into the snow. The cold air hit him, but he was already shivering from shock. He looked at his hand again. He needed a hospital. He needed an X-ray, a cast, painkillers. But an ER visit cost money. Even with a payment plan, the initial copay would wipe out his savings. "I can't go to the hospital," he realized with a sinking horror, the piano money. He walked 3 blocks to a CVS pharmacy. He was crying now, silent tears freezing on his cheeks. He wasn't crying from the pain. He was crying because he knew he was failing. He bought a roll of athletic tape, a metal finger splint, and a bag of ice. Total cost, $18. He went into the public bathroom. He locked the door. He bit down hard on his leather wallet. He closed his eyes, and he pulled. Snap! A guttural scream ripped through his throat, muffled by the wallet. He fell to his knees on the dirty tile floor, gagging, nearly vomiting from the agony. He had reset the bone, or at least he hoped he had. With shaking hands, he taped the broken fingers tightly to his middle finger. He taped it over and over until his hand looked like a stiff, white club. He sat on the floor for 20 minutes, waiting for the world to stop spinning. He checked his pocket, $1,100. He was still $500 short. He had 48 hours, and he had 1 working hand. Christmas Eve morning, the last stand. The next morning, Joseph couldn't button his shirt. His left hand was a swollen, useless lump of fire. He had to use his teeth to zip up his coat. He told Sarah he had sprained his wrist closing a file cabinet drawer. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him with those big, knowing hazel eyes. She buttered his toast for him. That small act of kindness broke him more than Tony's shouting. He left the house at 6:00 a.m., but he couldn't do heavy lifting anymore. No moving, no construction. He went to the only place that would take a cripple. The Plasma Donation Center. He sat in the chair for 2 hours as they drained his plasma. He got $50. He went to a pawn shop, not to buy the piano but to sell. He sold his watch, a gift from his late wife. He got $80. He sold his good leather boots and bought cheap sneakers from a thrift store. He made $40 profit. It wasn't enough. It wasn't moving the needle. By 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve, snow was falling thick and heavy. The city was shutting down. People were rushing home with colorful bags, laughing, holding hands. Joseph stood outside a luxury department store downtown. He was wearing a sandwich board sign, "Going out of business sale this way." A shop owner had paid him $10 an hour to stand in the blizzard and direct traffic. Joseph stood there, a statue of misery. The wind cut through his coat. His broken hand throbbed in time with his heartbeat. Passers-by looked at him with pity or worse, with disgust. They saw a homeless man. They didn't see a father. At 5:00 p.m., the shop owner came out and handed him $60. "Go home, buddy. Merry Christmas." Joseph took the cash. He walked to a bus stop shelter and sat down to count. He emptied his pockets. He uncrumpled every bill. He counted the coins. $1,420. The piano was $1,600. He was short $180. He stared at the money. It was a fortune to some, but it was a failure to him. He was $180 short of the promise. $180 short of redemption. He could buy a cheaper keyboard. He could buy a toy. But that wasn't the promise. Real ivory keys, strings that vibrate. Joseph closed his eyes. He felt a strange lightness in his head. The hunger, the pain, the exhaustion, it all merged into a singular buzzing sound. He stood up. Maybe I can haggle, he thought. Maybe the pawnshop guy has a heart. He began to walk toward the pawnshop, 10 blocks away. The snow was deep. His sneakers were soaked. He couldn't feel his toes. Block 1, block 2. His vision began to tunnel. The streetlights elongated into streaks of light. Block 3. His legs felt like lead. Why were they so heavy? Block 4. He saw the pawnshop in the distance. The neon sign LOANS was flickering. Just get there, he told himself. Just beg him. Get on your knees and beg. He took another step. The sidewalk seemed to tilt sideways. Joseph tried to correct his balance, but his legs didn't listen. He pitched forward. The concrete rushed up to meet him. He hit the ground hard. The wad of cash flew out of his hand, scattering onto the snow like dead leaves. "Sir, sir." A voice called out from far away. Joseph tried to push himself up. He tried to reach for the money. Sarah's piano, but the darkness was warm and it was welcoming. It pulled him down, wrapping him in a soft, black blanket. Joseph Miller, the man who had fought the world for 10 days, closed his eyes on the snowy sidewalk. And he didn't open them again. Christmas Eve, 9:45 p.m. The first thing Joseph noticed was the smell. It wasn't the smell of pine needles or roasting turkey. It was the smell of rubbing alcohol and latex. Then came the sound. Beep, beep, beep. He opened his eyes. The light was blindingly white. He blinked, trying to focus. He was lying on a narrow bed with stiff sheets. There was a tube in his arm. Panic hit him like a physical blow. He sat up, ripping the IV line out of his arm without thinking. Blood welled up on his skin. "Whoa, sir, lay back down." A nurse in blue scrubs rushed over, pushing him gently back onto the pillows. "You collapsed, honey. You're at St. Luke's. You were severely dehydrated and hypothermic." Joseph pushed her hands away, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What time is it?" "It's almost 10 o'clock, the nurse said soothingly. "On Christmas Eve. You're lucky a police officer saw you fall." 10 o'clock. The words echoed in Joseph's empty skull. The pawnshop closed at 8:00 p.m. He had missed it. It didn't matter if he had the money now. It didn't matter if he begged. The shop was closed. The shutters were down. The piano was locked away behind steel bars until after the holidays. "My things," Joseph rasped, his throat feeling like sandpaper. "Where are my things?" "We have them right here." The nurse pointed to a clear plastic bag on the bedside table. "The officer collected the cash that was scattered around you. It's all there." Joseph grabbed the bag with his shaking hand, the one that wasn't in a splint. He looked at the wet, crumpled bills inside. $1,420. It was just paper now. Useless, green paper. It couldn't buy the one thing he needed. "I have to go." Joseph swung his legs over the side of the bed. His head swam and black spots danced in his vision. "Sir, you can't leave." The nurse blocked his path. "Your heart rate is erratic. You have a fever. You have 2 broken fingers that need to be set properly. If you walk out there, you could collapse again." "If I stay here," Joseph looked her in the eye, his voice hollow and dead, "I'd die anyway." He wasn't talking about his body. He was talking about his soul. The nurse saw the look in his eyes, the look of a man who has nothing left to lose. She stepped back slowly. "I can't stop you," she whispered. "But please, Sign the AMA form against medical advice. Joseph signed the paper with a scribble. He put on his damp coat. He shoved the plastic bag of money into his pocket. It felt heavy, like a bag of stones. He walked out of the sliding glass doors and into the freezing night. The city was silent. The blizzard had stopped, leaving Chicago covered in a thick white blanket. The streetlights reflected off the snow, making the world look magical. For everyone else, it was a white Christmas. For Joseph, it was a graveyard. He walked. He didn't have money for a cab, and he couldn't bear the thought of being around people on a bus. He needed the cold. He needed the pain in his legs to distract him from the pain in his chest. He walked past windows where families were gathering. He saw silhouettes of fathers lifting their children to put stars on trees. He saw mothers setting tables. He heard laughter spilling out onto the street. He felt like a ghost haunting the living. I promised her, the voice in his head screamed. I swore on her mother's memory. He looked at his broken hand. The nurse had rewrapped it, but it still throbbed. He had sold his blood for this. He had sold his dignity. He had broken his body. And for what? To come home empty-handed. He reached his apartment building. He stood outside the front door for a long time. His hand hovered over the buzzer. He considered turning around. He considered walking until he froze to death. It would be easier. Sarah would get the insurance money. Maybe that would be better. But then he remembered her smile. He remembered the paper piano. Cowards run, he told himself. Fathers stay. He unlocked the door. The climb to the 4th floor took an eternity. Every step was a judgment. Failure, step. Liar, step. Broke, step. He reached door 4B. He unlocked it quietly, praying she was asleep. If she was asleep, he could sit in the dark and figure out how to tell her in the morning. He pushed the door open. The apartment was dark, lit only by the blinking red and green lights of the tiny, plastic Christmas tree in the corner. Under the tree, the floor was bare. No boxes, no ribbons, just dust. Joseph stepped inside and closed the door. He leaned his back against it and slid down until he hit the floor. His legs finally gave out. He sat there in the dark, his wet coat pooling around him, his head resting on his knees. "Daddy." The voice was small, cutting through the silence like a knife. Joseph froze. He didn't look up. He couldn't. "Sarah, go back to bed," he choked out. His voice was cracked, unrecognizable. "Please." She didn't listen. He heard her small, bare feet padding across the wooden floor. She came closer. She stopped right in front of him. She was wearing her oversized flannel pajamas. She was holding her old, ragged teddy bear. "You're hurt," she whispered. She wasn't looking at the empty space under the tree. She was looking at him. She saw the bandage on his cheek from the glass. She saw the hospital brace on his hand. She saw the mud on his clothes. "I'm fine," Joseph lied, but the lie crumbled instantly. A sob escaped his throat, a harsh, ugly sound. "I didn't get it," Joseph confessed. The words poured out of him, mixed with tears he could no longer hold back. "I tried, Sarah. God, I tried. I worked every night. I sold my watch. I did everything." He looked up at her, his face wet with tears, eyes begging for forgiveness. "I missed the store closing. I don't have enough money. I lost my job 2 weeks ago. I have nothing. I failed you. I failed Mom." He waited. He waited for the disappointment. He waited for the tears of a child who realized Santa wasn't coming. He waited for her to hate him. Instead, Sarah's face remained calm, almost sad for him. "I know," she said quietly. Joseph blinked, the tears blurring his vision. "What?" "I know you lost your job," Sarah said. She sat down on the floor next to him, ignoring the dirt on his coat. "I saw the eviction letter in the trash. I saw your shoes were muddy when you said you were at the office. I heard you crying in the bathroom at night. You knew." "I was waiting for you to tell me," she whispered. "But you just kept working. You looked so tired, Daddy. You looked like you were dying." "I wanted to save Christmas," Joseph whispered. "You silly Daddy," Sarah shook her head, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "You thought the piano was Christmas." She stood up. She walked over to the kitchen counter. She picked up something heavy. It was her piggy bank. The pink ceramic pig she had guarded since she was 5 years old. It was taped shut with layers of duct tape because it was so full. She walked back to Joseph. "I was saving this for Disney World," she said, "or maybe a car when I grow up." She looked at the empty spot where the piano was supposed to be. Then she looked at her father's broken hand. "I don't need a piano," she said firmly. "I need my dad." Before Joseph could stop her, she raised the piggy bank high above her head. "Sarah, no." Smash! She threw it down onto the hardwood floor with all her might. The sound was explosive in the quiet apartment. Ceramic shards flew everywhere. And then the treasure spilled out. Hundreds of coins, quarters, dimes, pennies rolled across the floor, spinning and glistening in the Christmas lights. Crumpled dollar bills, birthday money from years ago, drifted down like confetti. It was a chaotic, beautiful mess. Sarah dropped to her knees amongst the broken shards. She scooped up a handful of coins and shoved them into Joseph's open, trembling hand. "Take it," she commanded, her voice fierce, tears finally spilling down her own cheeks. "Take it all. Sarah, use it for the rent, use it for the bills. I don't care." She was crying now, hugging him fiercely. "You hurt your hand for me, you didn't sleep for me. That is better than music, that is better than anything." Joseph stared at the coins in his hand. He stared at his daughter, who was hugging him so tight he could barely breathe. For 10 days he had chased a wooden box with strings, thinking it would prove his love. He had thought he was poor. He had thought he was a failure. But as he sat there on the floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and scattered pennies, holding the girl who had given up her dreams to save him, Joseph realized something. He wasn't poor. He was the richest man in the world. Christmas morning, 7 a.m., the winter sun poured through the frosted windows of apartment 4B, illuminating the battlefield on the living room floor. Joseph and Sarah were sitting cross-legged in the middle of the room. They weren't opening gifts. They were counting coins. $14.50 in quarters, Sarah announced, stacking the silver coins into a neat little tower. She looked tired, her eyes puffy from crying the night before, but she was smiling. Joseph added a stack of crumpled $1 bills to the pile. His broken hand was resting on a pillow, throbbing with a dull ache, but his heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. "Total?" Joseph asked. Sarah did the math on a piece of scrap paper. "With the money from your pocket and my piggy bank, we have exactly $1,762, $50. Joseph stared at the number. It was enough to pay the back rent, $850. It was enough to pay the electricity bill, $150. It was enough to buy groceries for a month. It was enough to save them. But it wasn't enough for the Yamaha upright piano. "Well," Joseph let out a long breath, leaning back against the sofa, "we can keep the lights on, and we can eat." "That's all that matters," Sarah said, though her eyes drifted for a split second to the empty corner where the piano was supposed to be. She hid it quickly, but a father sees everything. Joseph stood up, wincing as his stiff joints popped. "Get dressed, kiddo, put on your Sunday best." Sarah looked up, confused. "Why, the stores are all closed, it's Christmas." Joseph grinned. It was the first real, genuine smile he had worn in 10 days. "Who said anything about stores? Trust me." 8:30 a.m. they walked hand in hand through the snow-covered streets. The city was waking up. Church bells were ringing in the distance. Joseph led Sarah to a building a few blocks away, the St. Mary's Community Center. It was an old brick building that hosted bingo nights and soup kitchens. "Daddy, it's closed," Sarah said, pointing to the dark windows. "I know a guy," Joseph winked. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. A moment later, the heavy oak door creaked open. Mr. Henderson, the old caretaker who had known Joseph for years, stood there in a thick sweater. "Merry Christmas, Joe," Henderson said, his breath steaming in the cold air. He looked at Joseph's battered face and bandaged hand with concern, but he didn't ask questions. "Merry Christmas, Al," Joseph said. "Is it ready? Just like you asked. I turned the heat on an hour ago." Henderson stepped aside. Joseph gently pushed Sarah forward. "Go on." Sarah walked into the main hall. It was a large, dusty room with high ceilings. Sunlight streamed in through the stained glass windows, casting patches of red, blue, and gold light onto the wooden floor. And there, right in the center of the stage, sitting under a spotlight of dust motes, was a grand piano. It wasn't new. The black lacquer was chipped in places, but it was majestic, a beast of wood and wire waiting to be woken up. Sarah gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. She turned to Joseph, her eyes wide. "Daddy." "I couldn't buy you a piano, Sarah," Joseph said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I gave Al $50 to rent the hall for 2 hours. It's all yours." Sarah didn't run. She walked slowly toward the stage as if she were approaching an altar. She climbed the steps. She reached the piano bench and sat down. She ran her fingers over the keys. They were real ivory, cool and smooth to the touch. She looked down at her feet. There were 3 brass pedals, no soup cans. She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. Joseph stood at the back of the hall next to Mr. Henderson. He leaned against the wall, cradling his broken hand. He was exhausted, he was broke, he was unemployed. But when Sarah struck the first chord, none of that mattered. HMMMMM. The sound was rich and deep, resonating through the empty hall. It vibrated in Joseph's chest. Sarah began to play. It wasn't Jingle Bells or a simple carol. It was the piece she had been practicing on her paper piano for months. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Her fingers flew over the keys. She played with a passion and intensity that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. She played for the cold nights. She played for the empty fridge. She played for her father's broken hand. The music filled the room, swirling around them, chasing away the shadows of the last 2 weeks. Tears streamed down Joseph's face, but he didn't wipe them away. He watched his daughter, his brave, brilliant daughter, creating magic out of thin air. "I didn't fail," Joseph thought, a profound sense of peace settling over him. "I didn't fail her at all." As the final note faded into silence, hanging in the air like a prayer, Sarah kept her hands on the keys for a long moment. Then she turned around. Her face was glowing. She looked like an angel. "Merry Christmas, Daddy," she whispered across the hall. Joseph pushed himself off the wall and walked toward the stage to hug his world. Epilogue. 1 year later, the warehouse was bustling with noise. Forklifts beeped, men shouted, and the radio blasted rock music. Joseph Miller walked out of the manager's office, wearing a clean, reflective vest and a hard hat. He held a clipboard in his good hand. His left hand had healed, though the pinky was still a little crooked, a permanent reminder of the winter of '24. "Hey, boss," a young kid yelled from the loading dock. "Truck 4 is ready to go." "Good work, Marcus," Joseph called back. "Take a break." He had found a new job in January. It started as floor labor, but his experience and his insane work ethic got him promoted to shift manager by July. He checked his watch. 5:00 p.m., time to go. He drove his used sedan, not new but paid for, to the small music school on 4th Street. He walked into the recital hall. It was packed with parents. Sarah was on stage. She was 11 now, taller, wearing a blue dress. She was sitting at a shiny Yamaha upright. She finished her piece and the crowd erupted in applause. She stood up and bowed. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they found Joseph. She waved. Joseph waved back, his crooked finger raised high. They went home to the same apartment. In the corner of the living room, where the plastic tree used to be, stood a beautiful second-hand piano. It wasn't the brand new one from the pawn shop. It was better. It was the one they had saved for together, dollar by dollar, month by month. Joseph sat in his armchair, listening to Sarah practice. The radiator still hissed, and the wind still howled outside, but inside, the house was filled with music. And Joseph knew, deep in his bones, that as long as the music played, they would always be rich. If this story touched your soul or made you want to hug your family a little tighter tonight, please hit that like button. It helps us share this message with the world. And don't forget to subscribe, because here we don't just tell stories. We share lives. Merry Christmas, everyone, and remember, family is the greatest gift. You don't need a full wallet to have a full life.